Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is moving forward with a referendum to decide on the future of Alberta.
Just because you acknowledge frustration doesn't mean that it goes away if you ignore it. I think people need to understand that. If you ignore the fact that 700,000 people went out and signed a petition campaign saying, let's have this vote, and I choose to ignore it, that just doesn't make it go away. What will happen is that one side will get the majority of the vote, and then the other side will have to stand down. And I think that that's the important part that you go through in a democracy.
This fall, the Alberta government will ask whether the province should stay in Canada or should kickstart the legal process for a binding referendum on separatism, on leaving Canada. This new ballot question won't trigger a separation if the province votes yes in October, but rather it will give the government an understanding of where the province wants to go next, if there will be a secession vote, in fact. Smith says she wants Alberta to remain in Canada, but owes it to the separatists and the people who want to stay in Canada to give them options. I spoke with Alberta's Minister of Finance, Jason Nixon, about the referendum and Danielle Smith's response to the criticism she's been receiving. Jason Nixon is Alberta's Minister of Finance, and he joins me now. Nice to see you again, Minister.
Well, thanks for having me on, Rosemary.
With your new job title, I appreciate you being here. I'm just going to simply start by asking you why the government is moving forward with this choice of either remaining in Canada or beginning the process of a referendum.
Well, Alberta has citizen-initiated referendum laws. They've existed for a long time in our province. Alberta's government believes in allowing our citizens to be able to participate in democracy. The reality is over 700,000 people have signed 2 different petitions asking to have a conversation about this issue. The government's position is very clear, and the Premier's position is clear. We believe the best way forward for Alberta and for Canada is to have a strong Alberta and a united Canada, and that's what we are going to continue to advocate for. But we also trust Albertans to be able to have their say. That's why we have these laws. It needs to be respected. And prolonging this conversation for a very long period of time is also not helpful. So we've heard from Albertans. They want to communicate with their government. And so we're going to make sure that they can do so. And then we await their recommendations and their answers, and then we'll react accordingly.
I understand all of that, obviously, but there are also millions of Albertans who don't want this debate. The other option was for the government to simply just walk away instead of now owning the questions yourself.
Well, again, but to walk away would be walking away from hundreds of thousands of Albertans. It's not an insignificant amount. Over 700,000 Albertans signed petitions calling for referendums on this issue, including those who, the biggest petition calling for a referendum for people that want to vote to make clear they want to remain in Canada.
Right.
And so for the government to proceed or not proceed with acknowledging that would be disregarding almost 700,000 voices in the province. And frankly, would be breaking our own rules and laws.
So you've said you want to remain in Canada. The Premier has made that clear as well. What is your government going to do to make that case to Albertans?
Well, the Premier is already out making that case. I mean, if you've seen her comments this morning, she's very, very clear on her position. She's already out campaigning. And she's made clear that she's going to be all across this province laying out her case for why Alberta and Canada can work together. She also has been working on this issue for the last several years, including just recently, obviously, with the Memorandum of Understanding between her and the Prime Minister, advocating for the removal of the 9 bad laws, putting forward a plan that shows that we can work in cooperative federalism in this country. So she's already doing that work, and now it's her job to go across the province and make that case to Albertans directly, and she's going to do that.
Is there anything more that the federal government can do to make that case to Albertans? Is there anything you would like to see from them that would help you in that while you're making that sales pitch to Albertans?
Well, Albertans are frustrated. I think all of us agree on that. And 10 years of the situation with the federal government under a different prime minister have had a significant impact. We've been sounding the alarm in this province about that for a very long period of time. We have to give credit to the new prime minister and his cabinet, who have worked closely with our cabinet and our premier to try to put forward a plan that will work, that will help deal with some of the legitimate concerns of this province. I really would encourage my federal colleagues to continue down that road and help the Premier build the case of why Canada can work with a strong Alberta inside Canada. And so that would be my best advice to our federal colleagues. We're going to continue the important work on the MOU. Let's get a pipeline built that's going to benefit this province and this country. And let's build a good case for why Canada works with a strong Alberta in it.
I'm glad you brought up the pipeline because and now in your new role as Minister of Finance, I wonder if you are worried that this period of instability leading up to October 19th is going to create problems for attracting a private proponent or just securing more capital in the energy industry in your province. Is that a concern that this is now maybe difficult for private investors to come in and see a clear path forward?
Well, we're very confident on the proponent, and we're very confident on continuing to see investment in the energy sector here in Alberta. The reality is, of the largest oil-producing places in the world, Alberta is still the most secure no matter what. Albertans having a conversation about Confederation and their role in it is not creating as much instability as a war in the Middle East, as an example. But that said, Rosemary, you're right. Yeah. This conversation does create uncertainty. Money does not like uncertainty. What I can tell you is the conversation's happening. The ship has sailed. Hundreds of thousands of Albertans are having it. There's petition locations all across the province. And allowing that uncertainty to take place for much longer will also have negative impacts. So the best thing forward, from my perspective, is to respect Albertans' voices on all sides of this argument and let them be able to express where they stand on this issue once and for all, and get it behind both the province and the country, and then move forward in the most productive way and make sure that Alberta can continue to do what Alberta does, which is produce oil and gas and be the economic engine of the country.
And again, I understand the government's desire to have this out and to move forward and put it past you and all the rest. But as you well know, sometimes you end up with results you don't want. David Cameron comes to mind. So I do just want to ask again whether you think there is any risk here, because it seems to me there is. There's real risk for Alberta and for the country.
Well, I think what's important to stress, Rosemary, is it's not the Alberta government that wants this question out, it's Albertans. We are unique in Alberta in that we have strong citizen referendum laws that allow our citizens to participate in democracy in the ways that they are right now. This is not the only referendum question that's taking place in Alberta right now. There's people right now collecting petitions on coal, as an example. And us sending a message to those Albertans, if they're successful in that coal petition, that we would not follow through, I think would be very, very unfortunate. And so at the end of the day, Albertans have asked for this, and the province is respecting that.
There are, I think, some concerns, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again as we get closer to the date, around potential foreign interference in this, and how, you know, a country like the United States, for instance, which has made sovereignty threats to this country in the past, we might see pieces of the United States get involved in this. Is that a concern to you? Is that something that the government is going to make sure is protected?
Yeah, look, our Minister of Public Safety is also Deputy Premier in Alberta. Mike Ellis has spoken about this, the Minister of Justice as well. They're going to be continue to make steps to make sure that our election system is protected. As you know, the federal government has also been facing down some challenges like that in different ways. And so, of course, any time that our democracy in any way could be attacked is something that we as governments have to make sure can't take place. We will work closely with Elections Alberta to be able to make sure that does not take place. But I would submit to you that while we need to do that while still respecting Albertans' rights to participate in the democratic process, if we were to stop Albertans from participating in the democratic process over that, frankly, those countries would win. And so we need to be able to make sure we protect Alberta and protect Canadian democracy, but we also need to be able to make sure people can participate in it.
Minister, I'll just end on this. What would you say to Albertans, and you and I talked about this just last week, who do feel frustrated, perhaps with the previous government, but still on a variety of issues? What would you say to those Albertans who are considering independence?
Well, look, Alberta is stronger in a united Canada, and we need to send a message to our fellow Canadians about the value of Alberta to Confederation. But we also in Alberta have to recognize the significant advantage that we have as being part of Confederation. And I would point them to the tremendous work that the Premier has been doing, the Memorandum of Understanding, the major movement on the 9 bad laws that have been a big concern for this province are significant. And the results of that are resulting in more jobs and more benefits to both Albertans and Canadians. And so I just hope that we take the time to go look at the benefit of us being together and also recognize that those grievances are being addressed and to take what the Premier says very, very seriously and go forward in that way.
Okay, Minister Nixon, nice to see you again, 2 weeks in a row. Appreciate it very much.
You bet. Good to see you.
Federal politicians of all stripes are supporting Alberta to stay in Canada. The Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, vows to campaign across the province and the country to encourage Albertans to stay. He, of course, is an Alberta MP. Prime Minister Mark Carney says Alberta plays an essential role in building Canada.
Canada's working. We're working in a spirit of cooperative federalism to make the country better. We're renovating the country as we go, and Alberta being at the center of that is essential.
It's the job of the Prime Minister to unite the country, and that if the country's not united, that too is the responsibility of the Prime Minister. We really should look at the situation in both Quebec and Alberta and ask ourselves how the Prime Minister is doing when it comes to national unity.
I spoke to one of the 3 Liberal Party MPs in Alberta, the Minister of Emergency Management and Community Resilience, Eleanor Olszewski. Minister Olszewski, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a total pleasure to be here.
I want to start with, I think, what the Premier decided to do, which was to forge ahead with a solution for her, I guess, which is to say, to ask Albertans whether they want to stay in Canada or whether they want to proceed with the process to begin a referendum. What did you make of that choice by the Premier?
Well, I did think it was a little bit of a strange choice. But that said, we now know what we need to do between now and October 19th. And, from my perspective and the perspective of the federal government, we're committed to moving ahead and ensuring that we have that we continue along with the relationship that we've had with Alberta, which is really focused on building our country and working collaboratively and cooperatively with Alberta. And I think, that's been our focus since the Prime Minister took office.
So let's talk about that. This MOU, a possible future pipeline, these were all things the Prime Minister was doing in part to address some of the concerns inside Alberta. Why do you think that hasn't been enough to satisfy the province and maybe even the Premier?
Well, I think that firstly, the steps that we've done with respect to Alberta, they weren't really taken on account of a referendum issue. We really, at the outset, the Prime Minister ran on a platform of uniting the country because we have so many external forces and risks that we need to deal with at the present time. And so that's the platform that he ran on, and I ran on as well. And in furtherance of that, we've been working hard with all provinces and territories, including Alberta. The MOU is a really important step, but it's not, and it's a symbol, I think, of our commitment to working cooperatively with the province. But as you say, it isn't everything. And I think Albertans have some Albertans have a sense of frustration that they've felt for a number of years now.
What more is the federal government willing to do then to make sure that Alberta stays inside the country? The Premier pointed to issues of immigration, guns. What else is the federal government willing to consider here?
Well, as I just said, Rosie, we're going to honestly continue down the path of working as hard as we can to show that the Federation works, that it works for other provinces, that it works for Alberta. And certainly a number of people that I talked to in my writing, and as I've traveled across the province, and in fact into other provinces as well, I was in Saskatchewan yesterday, I think people see the progress that's been made with respect to our discussions with Alberta, the progress that's been made in terms of unifying the country. And I'm hoping that Albertans see that we are completely committed to making sure that we listen to Albertans, that they're a strong voice. And as I say, that we stop talking past each other and work collaboratively and cooperatively, not just for the benefit of Albertans, but for the benefit of the entire country.
Given those examples there, given the work that the Prime Minister and you and others have done, are you surprised that the Premier is even putting this on the table, the possibility of a referendum? Because I wonder, Minister, whether it doesn't suggest that she doesn't believe that there's been enough progress.
in my own discussions with the Premier and having listened to her on a number of occasions, you know, she's been very supportive of how well the federal government has worked with her and her ministers as well. And so that's what we've heard. She was supportive even in her discussions yesterday. And so I have to believe what the Premier says when she says she's committed to strong Alberta within our country. I have to believe her when she says that. And as I say, we'll continue to work cooperatively with her to do what we can as a federal government to build up the country and make sure that Alberta voices are heard, and that to the extent that there are grievances that existed in the past, that we're doing our best to remedy those and to stop, as I say, talking past one another, stop fighting one another. At this point in time in Canada's history, it's so important for us to be unified. It really is.
Well, after this agreement we got to the next stage of the agreement about a week ago with the Prime Minister and the Premier, David Eby got pretty upset and suggested that the Prime Minister was rewarding bad behavior and the threat of separation by advancing these things with the Premier. Do you have concerns that it will look like the federal government is doing things because it is essentially being threatened with separation?
You know, I found the Premier's comments interesting. I guess, firstly, I understand and respect him for sticking up for his province. That's part of his job. But just with respect to the federal government working with Alberta, in terms of major projects that are at the Major Projects Office right now, the majority of them are in fact from British Columbia. And the Prime Minister has said repeatedly, as has Minister Hodgson and others, that we are prepared to work collaboratively with all provinces and regions of the country for the benefit of everyone, not only to strengthen our economy, but to make sure that Canada works for people no matter what region, province, or territory that they're from.
What would you say, Minister, to Albertans who right now aren't buying what you're selling and are thinking that, yes, I would like a referendum, I would like to be able to vote to leave the country? What would you say to those people?
I would say to those people that to watch what the federal government is doing, because we are working so hard to reset the relationship with Alberta and make sure, as I say, that Alberta voices are heard. You know, we live in the most amazing country in the world, and I think when push comes to shove on October 19th, and I hear it from so many people in my riding and across the province as well, I believe that Albertans all across the province are going to step up. They're going to step up for Canada. I truly believe that. I believe that most Albertans see the strength of our province and our province within a united Canada. And there may be grievances. We won't always agree on everything. That's absolutely never going to be the case. But I think what we've shown is that when we collaborate, when we cooperate together, we can do things like we can sign an MOU and the subsequent agreements that have been the offshoot of that. And we can do a number of other things for the benefit of not just Alberta, but for the other prairie provinces as well. And I'm thinking of, the agreement that we made with China that was so beneficial to Western farmers. And so I'm confident that in the end, Albertans will see that, they'll see how hard we're working, and that they will be committed to this beautiful province within our most amazing country.
Okay, Minister, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. Thank you.
The Alberta Premier is putting forward, as we've been talking about, this modified version of 2 questions for Albertans after an Alberta judge ruled the petition for a separation question in one instance did not meet the duty to consult with First Nations.
The court does not allow for a binding referendum because of a recent court decision, which we're appealing. But I want to get an indication from Albertans about, are we going to have this debate? Which direction are we going to go?
If that side wins,
That's Premier Smith speaking with David Cochrane on Power and Politics on Friday, saying the government is appealing that court's decision while moving forward on a question about whether the government should, in fact, move towards a separation referendum. That's one of the options that will be on the table. I spoke with the chief of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation earlier. Chief Allan, Adem, thank you so much for joining me. I know you're on a holiday, so thanks for making a little bit of time there for us today.
Thanks for having me on the air.
I just want to start with the reaction, I guess, to this move by the Premier to add a question from the government asking if Alberta should remain part of Canada or hold a referendum on it separating. What did you make of that decision?
It's a win for us still. You know, it's a great position to be in because now, you know, she puts the question before Alberta, do you want to have a referendum on a referendum? But reality sinks in real quick. My approach to this and my advice would be altogether to cancel it out. Mm-hmm. Do not hold a referendum. Do not appeal the court hearing that was given down by the courts. Live up to it. And, you know, I'll give you a prime example of what leadership is all about. You know, if you want to build a province like Alberta in Canada, you have to work with the First Nations people. And we're not here to kick anybody down. Albertans deserve better, and we're here to work with Albertans. And if the Premier doesn't feel that she doesn't want to work with the First Nations, well then, you know, that's the Premier's position. But we as First Nations, we are still willing to work with Albertans and Canadians alike because it is our responsibility to protect this country that we call home, Canada, Alberta. You know, it's like the Great War of 1812, where we had to fight off the Americans from trying to annex Canada. We're still doing it today, protecting Canadians and for Albertans alike. We don't want to go nowhere.
Yeah. Chief, I don't know. So I take your point that this at least, you know, sort of puts things off, but you would have rather she just walked away from it entirely. What is your community willing to do to try and convince people that this is the path forward, that independent Alberta is not the path forward?
It's a better place to work together, to work hand in hand, collaboratively. If you look at a landscape of where everybody unites together, the First Nations have an economic say, economic opportunity, where the government puts out positions of major projects and what's doable, what's not, environmental reviews, instead of creating laws that go against the First Nations in regards to extraction of natural resources, you know, and put a plan in place for the affected First Nations that are going to be affected by major development and all this stuff. Don't create laws that are going to make people be criminals within their own traditional territories because they practice their way of life. Mm-hmm. And be understandable that we are here for everybody in this country that you all call Canada and the provinces that you decide to live on. It's very beautiful and it is our home and we love our home.
Are you worried about what might happen? Because there's sort of two questions there, whether Alberta should stay in Canada or whether they should go forward with a referendum. Are you worried about how this might unfold, Chief?
I'll leave that up to Albertans. We've done our job to raise the question. Mm-hmm. We're honored to be part of Alberta. And we, the First Nations, you know, we've come this far. our rights were in jeopardy. We've spoke up, we've risen, and we, the First Nations, we will come out and vote on the referendum as well. And hopefully that, we garner enough support, because I know it's going to be overwhelming. 73% of Albertans better come out to vote in favor of a no vote for separation on the referendum.
Okay, Chief Allan Adem, let's speak again as we get closer to that date, but thank you for making a little bit of time for me today.
Thank you for having me on the air.
Albertans are set to vote on a question this fall, which will have implications for the future of the province and the country.
Now is the time for Albertans to decide whether we want to spend the time, expense, and effort pursuing separation, or whether Albertans want to remain in Canada.
Alberta's Premier announced that province-wide referendum set for October 19th that will ask Albertans this question: should Alberta remain a province of Canada, or should the government of Alberta commence the legal process required under the Canadian Constitution to hold a binding provincial referendum on whether or not Alberta should separate from Canada? Smith said a vote in favor of separation doesn't trigger separation itself, but instead would allow the province to start the legal process to hold that referendum on separation on a future date. Some separatists upset with this move by the Premier have threatened to oust Premier Smith over her referendum question. Others have indicated the Premier's path forward makes a lot of sense. Keith Wilson is an Alberta constitutional lawyer and advocate for Alberta separation, and I spoke to him earlier. Keith Wilson, thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
What do you think of this decision by the Premier to ask Albertans, do you want to stay in Canada, or do you want to begin a process to hold a referendum? Is this a setback for someone like yourself?
Well, I don't think so. And the reason is I don't think she had a choice. With the court ruling that we've had, she really had little option. And what I think is encouraging for me about it is that it allows those of us like myself who are strong supporters of Alberta independence to keep the moving forward and keep the discussion alive about why we think Albertans would be better off as our own country.
I mean, the other option that she had would have been just to walk away from it entirely. So why do you think that she felt she had to put something on the table that she really now owns, because it is going to be a government, a government question put to citizens?
Well, I've known the Premier for a long time, and she's a great believer in democracy and in grassroots democracy and direct democracy. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is that our former Premier, or Deputy Premier, Thomas Lukaszuk, initiated the Forever Canada campaign and got 400,000 signatures. And those documents don't talk about a vote other than a referendum on staying in Canada. And then the Mitch Sylvester Leave campaign, Stay Free Alberta, got 300,000. Mm-hmm. So, and the polling is showing that a majority, or potentially a majority, of UCP members or political party support independence. So I think she committed that if the numbers were there, the people would get to decide.
So as you alluded to there, this gives you some time to try and build support. Yes. It's happening at a time when the Premier is now pretty clear about where she stands. She wants, obviously, Alberta to remain, and you have a federal government who's going to try and demonstrate why Alberta should remain. So how are you planning to try and build support in that context?
Well, where I do strongly disagree with the Premier is I don't think we've had the progress that she describes. I respectfully think she's overstating things. We haven't had a repeal of what's known in Alberta as the 9 bad laws. We still have the tanker ban. The oil industry here, as you know from your coverage, is very concerned about the feasibility of the combined cost of the industrial carbon tax, the Pathways project, the methane emissions. And Albertans who are seeking independence, concerns are not purely economic. Sure. There's serious concerns about other policies that have come out of Ottawa that we don't feel many of us align with our values.
There has been progress, though, on those 9 bad laws, and there is, I would argue, a push from the federal government now for another pipeline. Whether the tanker ban remains in place, I don't know. But there does seem to be, and you tell me if you don't feel the same, there does seem to be a recognition from this government that things need to improve for Alberta.
Well, I hope that's the case, and I hope that we see more of that. What I find striking is that remedying some of the policies from the last 11 years that Albertans perceive to be harmful to our interests is actually easy, because there's many things that governments are asked to do at any level that are actually quite challenging, but this one's not. It's simply, the No More Pipelines law was Bill C-69. That could be repealed and take us back to the environmental assessment framework that we had before that facilitated billions of dollars of investment and job creation. Yeah. And the Prime Minister refuses to go there. I just don't understand it.
Well, to play devil's advocate, I mean, he refuses to go there, but he puts C5 in place, which would allow him to suspend that for any project that he goes that needs to move forward. And they are consulting on a variety of other regulations and changes that they're going to make to address some of those concerns. So, is it that you don't trust them, or you want to wait to see how far they get, or is there nothing they could do here that would satisfy you?
There's obviously things that could be done that would satisfy those Albertans who are strongly seeking independence. But everything comes at such effort. We have the world that needs our resources. Alberta could be single-handedly stimulating the economy, generating significant revenue for the federal government, dealing with this deficit problem, inflation problem, employment problem, social problems. And the amount of political capital and effort that the Premier Smith has had to put in just to getting the MOU. And weekly, with respect, Prime Minister Carney seems to be adding new conditions. This last week, he was in Vancouver, and in his speech, he talked about, the pipeline will only go ahead if there's significant financial benefits to British Columbia. That's a new condition, and he's given vetoes. So most of us here in Alberta that are paying attention to this do not believe there will be a pipeline.
I don't have a lot of time, but I'm sure we'll have you back. Why do you think, though, that this is the solution? Like, it's complicated to live in a federation, and provinces have grievances of their own, and Ottawa has to try and juggle all of those demands. Why is this the solution? Because it is a more extreme solution, I would argue. Why is this the solution for you?
Well, two things. First of all, the Premier talks about, fixing Canada, and my retort to that is, I don't think the majority of Canadians and the majority of people who live in Ontario and other places actually think Canada's broken. So that's a problem. And the other is Albertans have increasingly realized, I think Canada is actually not an optimal size. I'm a student of history. I'm a political scientist. I'm a lawyer. I'm a dad. And I don't think, and I was originally born in Ontario, and I've lived in British Columbia, and I've spent most of my life here. I think Canada's too big to be effectively governed. We have regional economies, we have regional cultures, and Albertans have everything that we need to be an extremely successful country on our own.
Okay, Keith Wilson, let's leave it there, but we will stay in touch if that's okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
As you heard there, critics of Premier Smith argue she's been catering to the interests of separatists. This past week, the Premier, who says she would vote for Alberta to remain in Canada, says that's not the case.
I have been actively campaigning to save our country and to resolve these issues from the moment I got elected. Just because you acknowledge frustration doesn't mean that it goes away if you ignore it.
In the weeks leading up to Smith's announcement, a judge overturned the province's approval of a pro-separatist petition, saying that the government failed to properly consult with Indigenous peoples, a ruling Smith has said she plans to appeal. But it's part of the reason that Smith says the province needs to proceed with the referendum question. Also, another reason she points to is the Forever Canadian petition signed by more than 400,000 Albertans who want to stay in Canada. Some have criticized Smith's characterization, since Forever Canadian was created as a way to actually block the separatist petition and movement. Joining me now, though, is Forever Canadian's creator, the former Deputy Premier of Alberta, Thomas Lukaszuk. Nice to see you again.
Thank you to have me, Rosemary.
Let's start with that number. You had gathered 400,000 signatures for your petition, and the Premier points to it as proof that Albertans want a referendum. What do you make of that characterization by the Premier?
Well, the premier is pointing to two petitions and hoping that they now justify her choice to have a referendum question. The fact is that the Forever Canadian petition was filed as a policy petition, and that is why it didn't have to go through the review of its wording and constitutionality. This is an option that legislation in Alberta allows to force a vote in the legislature. Now, separatist petition hasn't even been counted yet. We don't actually know how many signatures they may have collected because there is an injunction. But Premier had a need. She had to have a question on a referendum because it appears now a majority of her party members and large contingent of her MLAs in her caucus demanded that a petition be put forward. And for the last year, the Premier really has been paving a way to have a separatist petition succeed. She changed the legislation 3 times in 1 year to foster for that to happen. She retroactively overrode judicial decisions that were blocking separatists. So now she put forward a question that basically says to her party political base, re-elect me, work with me, and I will for sure give you a petition 1 year after the next election.
Okay, but she also very clearly, Thomas Lukaszuk, says that she's voting for Alberta to remain in Canada, that is the case she will be making between now and October 19th. So it's a little hard to reconcile what you're saying with what she's saying. What do you make of the fact that she is now going to be on the same team as you? Are you willing to work with her?
Look, we will work with it.
Yeah.
We will work with everybody, Rosemary. It's what's more difficult to reconcile is what she says with what she does, because those are two divergent things. Rosemary, yesterday in St. Albert, there was a Rainmaker parade for a rodeo, and her MLAs were riding in separatist trucks in a parade. So things just don't square off. Premier is in what I would call a political pickle. Most Albertans don't want to separate, by far most Albertans. Most Albertans don't want a referendum. But most people in her party who have shown that if they are not happy with their leader, they will oust them, because that's exactly what they did with Jason Kenney. They want a binding constitutional referendum. So she gave... Yes, go ahead.
So sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to turn to sort of what you're doing about all of this. So this is now the reality. This is what Alberta is faced with. So what do you plan to do between now and October 19th to make sure that what you want for Alberta to remain in Canada actually happens? What's the strategy?
Well, so what we have to do is we have to win this next referendum, which is a referendum whether we want a referendum. We have to win this decisively to make sure that we don't have the next referendum, because, Rosemary, this already has a chilling effect on investment in Alberta. And from a social perspective, I've never seen Alberta as divided as it is right now. Literally, neighbors don't speak with neighbors anymore. So if we are to have this referendum and then wait another year and a half for another referendum, the damage that will be caused to Alberta will be irreparable. So my job right now, and anybody who's allied with us, is to make sure that we have a massive voter turnout on October 19, and we send a very strong signal to the Premier, but frankly to the rest of the world, that we want to stay in Canada, that vast majority of Albertans want nothing to do with separatism, and that this country can't be divided.
Let me ask you a question about your petition. I know that it was a policy move, that you're trying to galvanize momentum around this. But I wonder whether, upon reflection, it was also a mistake, given the way the Premier is using it and pointing to it as evidence that this needs to be put to the people in order to move forward.
Rosemary, no, it wasn't a mistake. It was filed at a time when the law said that he who files first gets to have his petition heard first, and that would mean this question would go to legislature. Premier immediately introduced Bill 14 and changed that law, allowing separatists to file their petition, but not only to file, but she lowered the number of required signatures by half, and she gave him more time. So at the time when the petition was filed, it could have only gone to the legislature. But what the Premier has done is she has changed the law several times, allowing for a competitive petition to go forward. And unfortunately for them, the competitive petition got blocked by courts. So Premier rather desperately is trying to use our petition as a justification for having a referendum, which frankly is only required of her by her party members.
What would you like, Mr. Lukaszuk, to see from the federal government? The federal government or the federal Conservatives? Mr. Poilievre has said he's willing to campaign across the country. What would be helpful for people who want to support you, particularly from the government side?
Well, I think at this point in time, Prime Minister Carney is doing what he should be doing. He seems to be working as collaboratively as he can, showing that collaborative federalism can actually work. The Premier has been doing exceptionally well. You know, she managed to extract from federal government concessions that what seemed to be impossible just a year ago. So showing Albertans that this country actually works and that Alberta is much better off being part of Canada than whatever it would look like as an independent entity, that's the right thing to do. Now, from our Conservative MPs, they have been silent on this issue. They have not participated in any of this discussion. I would encourage them to get involved and clearly, unequivocally show that they are Federalist and that they're going to campaign along with us, just as much as I am asking Premier Danielle Smith and her caucus. So far, she has promised that, but we're actually seeing to the contrary.
Well, we have seen, as I said, Mr. Poilievre has said that he is an Alberta MP, and
Yes.
he has made his position clear. But I take your point about the others. Thomas Lukaszuk, thank you for giving us the time. I know you've been on CBC a lot the past number of days, but I'm sure we'll speak again before the fall. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be with you.